Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the SEC Conference Call, your ultimate guide to one of the nation's best basketball conferences. This show is your courtside seats for all of the great action. We will spotlight the players to watch, take you inside the huddle with the coach's playbook, and deliver the expert analysis you've come to expect from us here at the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. We're thrilled to cover the heart-pounding action of this incredible conference. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP. And don't forget to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for all of our fantastic blogs and to learn how you can join the Crunch Time Express with one of our handicapping packages. Whether you're looking for an edge in sports wagering or just want more insights, we've got you covered. 16 teams, one conference, infinite excitement. The SEC has been the stage for legendary players, iconic coaches, and unforgettable rivalries. This is where passion meets competition and championship dreams are forged. Welcome to the SEC Conference Call. And now let's head to the studio with our host, Jessica, and our founder and senior analyst, Kenneth. Welcome back to the SEC Conference Call. Another week, another round of intense SEC basketball showdowns, and we're inching closer to March Madness. Let's take a look at this weekend's loaded slate of matchups. Jessica is getting a well-deserved day off. First up, South Carolina travels to Gainesville to take on Florida at Exactech Arena at the Stephen C. O'Connell Center. Can the Gators defend home court, or will the Gamecocks steal a crucial road win? In Athens, the Missouri Tigers face off against the Georgia Bulldogs at Stegeman Coliseum. Both teams are battling for SEC positioning. Who comes out on top? One of the biggest rivalry games of the day takes place in Oxford, where Mississippi State clashes with Ole Miss at the Sandy and John Black Pavilion. Bragging rights and conference standing positioning are on the line in this heated showdown. The LSU Tigers head west to take on Oklahoma at Lloyd Noble Center. Can LSU pick up a much-needed road win, or will the Sooners hold their ground at home? In Knoxville, the Vanderbilt Commodores take on the Tennessee Volunteers at Thompson Bowling Arena. Tennessee looks to continue its stronghold at home, but can Vanderbilt pull off the upset? The Kentucky Wildcats face a tough road test as they travel to Austin to take on Texas at the Moody Center. Both teams are fighting for momentum. Who will make a statement? Meanwhile, in College Station, the Arkansas Razorbacks battle the Texas A&M Aggies at Reed Arena. This one has major implications in the standings. It all leads up to our game of the week, as the Auburn Tigers head to Tuscaloosa for a massive showdown with the Alabama Crimson Tide at Coleman Coliseum. Two of the best teams in the conference and in the country collide in a fierce rivalry matchup. This one could have conference title race implications. With high-stakes matchups, rivalries, and teams fighting for SEC supremacy. This week's action is must-watch basketball. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride in the SEC. And now let me welcome in our founder and senior analyst, Kenneth, for the breakdown of these matchups.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another edition of the SEC conference call. Jessica, enjoy the day off. Tina, great job stepping in as always. Folks, we got 8 tremendous games to break down. We're going to get through the first 7 because you know what's on deck at the end of the show. It's quite simply the biggest game in SEC basketball history. Folks, that's not an overstatement. That's understanding the history of this conference. Welcome in everyone to the SEC conference call. This is your founder and senior analyst for the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Let's get to it, baby. And with our first matchup, we're going to head to a very pivotal matchup for the Texas A&M Aggies. The reason is it's not about conference positioning anymore. We're now starting to flip the calendar and start to gaze our eyes towards March. We know we got just a few weeks left in the regular season of conference play. Now teams are trying to make their case for seeding position and making the NCAA basketball tournament. So let's start here with this matchup. Folks, the Texas A&M Aggies will welcome in the Arkansas Razorbacks. And to quote my mentor and legendary broadcaster Brent Musburger, you are looking live at Reed Arena, College Station. The Texas A&M Aggies welcome in the Razorbacks of Arkansas in a very key SEC clash. Let's start with the team profiles. Let's start right there with the Arkansas Razorbacks. 15-9 on the season, 4-7 in SEC play. Folks, this is still our 44th power-ranked team in the nation. Did get a win in their last matchup against quality opponents. This team is 4-8. For the Aggies, and let's get back into this matchup here with Texas A&M. Comes in with a 19-5 record, 8-3 in conference play. They are our 19th power-ranked team. Very solid strength of schedule. This team's on a 4-game winning streak and against quality opponents. And folks, I told you at the beginning of conference play, you're going to see these teams with a lot of quality games against opponents because of the damage that the SEC did overall in the non-conference. 17 games, 12-5 in those games. As far as the injury impacts, we already know that Boogie Flan is still out for the season. Will not see him back in a Arkansas Razorback uniform this year. Who's got to step up? Trevor Brazile has got to step up for this team in his absence. All right, let's take a look at the breakdown here. We know that Arkansas has absolutely struggled to put the ball in the hoop in conference play, only averaging 68.8 points per game. That's 12th in the nation. They're really solid on the defensive end, about 72 points per game allowed. As far as the Aggies in conference play only, they're averaging about 70.5 points per game, so just a little bit better than Arkansas, only 11th best in the country. In the conference. In conference play. And then as far as their points per game allowed, you're looking at about 69 points per game. So expect a very hard-fought defensive matchup to where it may be the first team that cracks the 70-point barrier may win this contest. Going to give a slight edge to A&M as their defense is just a little bit stronger, as they allow just a little bit fewer points per game. But again, both teams are very, very stout here. As far as the offensive and defensive comparisons, let's start when the Razorbacks are on their offensive end of the court versus this A&M defense. Arkansas' strength is they have a decent field goal shooting percentage, about let's round it up to about 47% there, and they do a solid job from the free throw line, shooting about 73%. A&M strengths on the defensive end. This is an elite opponent field goal percentage defense. Their opponents are shooting from the field less than 40%. And as far as being able to lock down the paint, they average about a little over 4 blocks per game. I'm going to key on this matchup. Arkansas struggles in conference play offensively. Can they break through A&M's top-tier defense? Now let's take a look at the Aggies. For the Aggies, when they have the ball, their strength is strong rebounding team, 57% total rebounding percentage. Take advantage of those free throw opportunities. For Arkansas, their strength is they will turn you over, about 12 forced turnovers per game. In action in the passing lanes, this team averages almost 8 steals per game. Can Arkansas force those turnovers, limit A&M second chance opportunities, and of course get out into the fast break, create some of those easy points, or get to the foul line where they do excel? When I take a look at the turnover battle here, Arkansas turns the ball over about 11 times per game, forces 12, as I mentioned. A&M turns the ball over about 12 times per game. They force about 13. I'm going to give a slight edge to A&M as they're better in forcing those mistakes, but they do have to do a really good job of taking care of the ball. As far as the shooting breakdowns here, Arkansas from the field shoots about 47%, as I mentioned, almost 34% from behind the three-point line. Arkansas shoots only 42.5% from the field, only 31% from behind the arc. I'm going to give an edge to Arkansas as they're a little bit more efficient from the field. Now, as far as clutch, or as we like to call it, crunch time situations, Arkansas in 8 close games, they're 3-5. Texas A&M in 12 of those games, they're 9-3. So if this game is tight down the edge, going to give a slight edge to A&M, but here's where that edge could flip. Arkansas shoots 73% from the free throw line, as I mentioned. A&M only shoots 68%. Ooh. A&M, you're going to have to get some margin in this ball game. Some final thoughts and breakdowns here. Can Arkansas make this a competitive game, or would the A&M rebounding advantage and defensive control the outcome of this contest? I think it's going to be a fantastic game there in Arkansas. Looking forward to watching this game coming up here. Let's head over to Knoxville, Tennessee, and you are looking at Thompson Bowling Arena, aka the house that Pat Summitt built. Always going to give a lot of recognition to that legendary coach there for the Lady Volunteers. They welcome in-state rival, the Vanderbilt Commodores, in a very important game for the SEC conference standings, the SEC tournament standings, and of course, Selection Sunday coming up here in just less than a month away. Let's start with the team profile of Vanderbilt Commodores. 17-7 on the season, 5-6 in conference play, our 47th power ranked team. Against quality opponents, they are 3-7. For the Tennessee Volunteers, 20-5, 7-5 in conference play. Folks, they are still our 5th power ranked team in the nation. Tells you how strong that strength of schedule is, right? 13th best in the nation, if you're wondering. Quality opponents, as I mentioned, these teams are going to have a lot of quality opponents on their schedule. 15 games. The Vols are 10-5 in those contests. We got clearance as far as the injury report last night. Both teams, no major injuries to key contributors in this contest. Who needs to step up in this ball game? I'm going to start with Chaz Lanier for the Volunteers and Tyron Lawrence for the Vanderbilt Commodores. Those two must carry the offensive load for their respective teams there. As far as the rebounding, uh, Igor Milicic for the Vols, and then Alan Lubrin for Vandy must be able to control the boards. And then as far as playmakers, we call him Double Z here in Tennessee for the Vols. He's got to be able to control the pace and space of this ball game for the Tennessee Volunteers. Let's take a look at the scoring breakdown for both of these teams in conference games only. Vandy comes in averaging about 72 points per game. That's 10th best in the conference. Defensively is really where they struggle, allowing almost 78 points per game, 14th best in the conference. As far as the Volunteers go, this team absolutely struggles to put the ball in the basket. 66.5 points per game, 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC. But this is the number one scoring defense in the Southeastern Conference in conference games, 61 points per game. And folks, that's right in line with what they are as far as their national average. This team allows about 60 points per game overall, fourth best in the nation out of 364 teams. Edge here to Tennessee. Elite defense will challenge that Vanderbilt scoring. All right, let's take a look at the offensive and defensive comparisons here. The Vanderbilt Commodores on offense, where are their strengths? This team is efficient from the free throw line, shooting about 75% from the free throw line, balanced offense attack with multiple scorers. For Tennessee, their defense, quite simple. They absolutely lock down the perimeter. Their opponents shooting less than 30% from the three-point line. Can Vandy find open looks against this Tennessee suffocating defense? As far as when Tennessee has the ball, where does their strengths have to be? It has to start with excellent ball movement. This team averages about 16 assists per game. This team is one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the Southeastern Conference. They're rebounding on the offensive glass at about a 36% clip. That's outstanding, getting those second chance points. Vanderbilt's defensive strengths, they like to force turnovers, and boy, do they turn you over. They average about 14 turnovers per game forced in conference play. Plays physical defense, but allows a high rate of field goal percentage. Gotta force teams into some much poor shot selection, as their opponents are shooting about 45.5% from the field. That's why Vandy has struggled here as of late. Looking at the key matchup in this particular part of the breakdown, can Tennessee's rebounding dominance wear down that Vanderbilt defense? Let's take a look at the turnover edge here and see Vanderbilt turns the ball over about 9.5 times per game, forces 14. Nice plus, almost +5 in the turnover differential there. As far as Tennessee, they turn the ball over about 10 times per game. They force about, let's call it 12, so about +2 in the turnover differential. I'm going to give the Vandy the edge as in this category, as they're a little bit more aggressive in forcing opponents into turnovers. Now, here's going to be a very crucial aspect of this ball game. Vanderbilt shoots about 46% from the field, 32.5% from three-point line. Tennessee shoots about 45% from the field, about 34% from the three-point line. I think whichever team's able to shoot the three ball better in this contest has an excellent chance of coming out of here with a big-time victory. As far as clutch situations go, Vanderbilt 4-0 in those clutch situations. As I mentioned, shoots about 75% from the free throw line. Tennessee 3-3 in those games. They shoot about 75% as well. Going to give a slight edge here to Vanderbilt if the game is tight at the end of the ball game. Folks, this is a big point spread. We're looking at the consensus numbers here from our friends there in the desert we're looking at where we have this line. That 15.5, it's interesting. And around these parts, we do like interesting. So, final thoughts and analysis on this ball game. Tennessee's elite defense is a major advantage, but can Vanderbilt keep this game close in the first half and get this game deep into the second half? That will be the biggest question. If Tennessee's able to control the boards and limit turnovers, they should win comfortably. However, if Vanderbilt is able to get some high percentage shots, force Tennessee into some bad shots deep into the shot clock, this game could be very tight towards the end of this contest. And now let's head to beautiful Athens, Georgia, as you are looking live there on the beautiful campus there of the Georgia Bulldogs there in Athens, Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs will welcome in the Missouri Tigers. Let's start with the team profiles. Missouri comes into this contest 18-6, 7-4, in conference play. Power ranked still in our top 25 coming in at number 24. Did win their last contest against quality opponents. This team is 7-6 in those 13 matchups. As far as the Georgia Bulldogs, Georgia comes into this contest 16-9, 4-8 in conference play. This team is on a 2-game losing streak, and against quality opponents, the Georgia Bulldogs have really struggled. 3-9 on the season. Also, getting that injury report late last night as we're recording this extremely early here on Saturday morning. No major injuries to report for either team to any of their top 7 or 8 players there. So I'm going to go ahead and give you who needs to step up in this ball game. Folks, I've been talking about this young man all conference play, and that is Tamar Bates. Really like what I see out of this talented player there, averaging about 15 points per game, knocking down about 2 3-point baskets per game, shoots the free throw game really well, over 90% from the free throw line. For Georgia, I'm going to start there with Asia Newell. He is their leading scorer, about 15 points per game as well. He's about 83% from the free throw line. He does get to the foul line about 4 times per game, knocks down about 31% from the 3-point line there. Now let's take a look at the scoring and efficiency numbers for both teams. Let's start with Missouri in conference only. This team is the 5th best scoring offense in the conference at 77 points per game. They're allowing about 71 points per game. That's 4th best in the conference. Let's take a look at Georgia. This team struggles to shoot the ball. 67 points per game in SEC play, 14th out of 16 teams in the conference. This team also plays elite defense as well, as they allow about 70 points per game. That's 3rd best in the conference. Gonna give an edge to Missouri as they are able to just put the ball in the basket just a little bit more than what we've seen from the Georgia Bulldogs since conference play began. Let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses for each team. Let's start right there with the Missouri Tigers, as Missouri's strengths are effective shooting percentage. They shoot from the field about 48%. That's 6th best in the conference. And as I mentioned, one of the best scoring teams in the conference there. As far as Georgia, their strengths on defense, decent interior defense. Their opponents are shooting about 42% from the field, and this team has a strong rebounding presence. Their total rebounding percentage, about 54%. Missouri's fast-paced offense versus this Georgia defense and their ability to slow the game down will be a key to who comes out on top in this contest. As far as when Georgia has the ball versus this Missouri defense, we talked about the rebounding strengths there for the Georgia Bulldogs. They're going to need to hit the offensive glass quite a bit. And as I pull up their offensive rebounding percentage here in conference, all right, so looks like the Bulldogs do a decent job of hitting the boards on the offensive glass, about 32%. They're going to need to hit the offensive reboundings quite a bit since they don't shoot that well. And as far as drawing fouls, this team draws about 22 and a half free throw attempts per game. They're going to need to be able to get to the foul line and then knock down their free throws. And they do a really good job there at the free throw line, shooting about 71% there. So that's going to be a key there for Georgia. As far as Missouri's strengths on defense, this team can turn you over in droves. They force about 14 turnovers per game. And this team is elite from guarding the opponent's three-point line. Their opponents shoot less than 34% from the three-point line. A key in this matchup, can Georgia take care of the ball a little bit better? I want to go deep into the numbers here and look at, let's see, what is, okay, here's what I wanted to look at. Okay, Georgia's assist to turnover ratio. Folks, this is not how you win ball games in a conference this deep. For every assist, they average a turnover. So that's a 1-to-1 ratio. That is not what you want to see from teams here. And want to take a look at one more stat here. Okay. Georgia averages about a little less than 7 made threes per game. Missouri averages almost 9 made three-pointers per game. So you're talking about a difference of roughly 6 to 9 points in a game where we know that Georgia's very limited on the offensive end of the court. That may be a significant problem there. All right, let's take a look at the shooting breakdown here. Missouri shoots about 48% from the field, 37% from three. Georgia shoots about 46% from the field, less than 33% from three. Gonna give an edge here to Missouri as their shooting efficiency across the board is much better. Both of these teams are roughly about the same as far as clutch situations. Missouri 3-3, they shoot about 72% from the free throw line. Georgia 4-3, shoots about 71% from the free throw line. No big advantage there for either team. And folks, as I look at where this line currently sits there from where it opened to our numbers, folks, we expect a very tightly contested ball game here. All right, so let's take a look at here. If Georgia's able to control the tempo and rebounding efficiency, they have a good chance to win this contest. So, gonna be interested to really see how this game plays out here. And let's head over to the Magnolia State, as the Ole Miss Rebels will take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I'm sorry, I was looking over my notes here, and you are looking live at the Sandy and John Black Pavilion there on the campus of the Ole Miss Rebels. Always a quick hello to all of our friends there with Ole Miss. Thank you, ladies, for all of your support. And let's get into this matchup, because I think this matchup is a little bit interesting. So let's just take a look here at where the data is going to take us. And let's start there with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Come into this game 17-7, 5-6 in conference play, 30th in our power rankings. Against quality opponents, Mississippi State has actually fared fairly well, 7-7 against quality opponents. Fantastic job there. Let's take a look at the Ole Miss Rebels. Come into this contest with a 19-6 record, 8-4 in conference play. They are our 21st power ranked team, coming in riding a 3-game conference winning streak. Against quality opponents, they are 7-6. Key injuries, as we look at Matthew Morrell for Ole Miss, he's probable in this ball game, dealing with an undisclosed injury. If he is able to play, his shooting ability will be crucial. If he's out or limited, Ole Miss may struggle from deep. So who's going to need to step up? Let's start with, for Ole Miss, Sean Padula. He may have to carry some additional offensive scoring responsibilities in this ball game. Same can be said for Mississippi State and Josh Hubbard. He's got to do a fantastic job in this ball game. As far as being able to clear the boards there for Mississippi State, Keyshawn Murphy's got to do a fantastic job of manning the boards, as well as Mr. Brakefield for Ole Miss. He is absolutely going to have to hit the glass. And then as far as the playmakers go, Cameron Matthews for Mississippi State and Jalen Murray for Ole Miss. They need to control the pace and tempo of this game. Let's take a look at the scoring and efficiency numbers here for both teams. Let's start with Hail State there. As in conference play, this team averages about 74 points per game, 6th best in the conference, but they're also allowing 76 points per game in conference play. That's good for 11th. As far as the Ole Miss Rebels, they come in averaging for us about 74 points per game, about the middle of the pack there in the conference. Same can be said for their defense, a little bit slightly above the average there, allowing about 72 points per game. Going to give a slight edge here to Mississippi State. Marginally better offensive numbers is what I'm looking at here. All right, let's take a look at when Mississippi State is attacking this Ole Miss defense. What are State's strengths? Effective inside scoring. So inside of that 3-point line, this team shoots at about 56% clip. Strong assist to turnover ratio. You heard me mention it in the breakdown previously, how Georgia struggles in that. This team average about 1.5 assists to every turnover. So you'd like to be that number to be closer to 2-to-1 turnover assist to turnover ratio, but 1-to-5 is definitely respectable. As far as the Ole Miss defensive strengths, opponents struggle from the 3-point line against Ole Miss, and that has been a staple of Ole Miss head coach Chris Beard for a long time. Their opponents shoot 31% from the 3-point line, and they do force turnovers, about 14 forced turnovers per game. Key in this matchup here, Mississippi State's ability to score inside versus Ole Miss interior defense. Now let's take a look at the Rebels when they're on offense versus Mississippi State's defense. Ole Miss is effective from the 3-point line, shooting about 35.5% from the 3-point line, and this team does a fantastic job of taking care of the ball. Only 8.5 turnovers per game. That's best in the conference there. As far as Mississippi State's strength on defense, this team is aggressive on guarding the 3-point line. Their opponents shoot about 36% from the 3-point line, and this team definitely gets into the passing lanes there as they force almost 9 steals per game. Key matchup for Ole Miss in this matchup is their 3-point shooting versus Mississippi State's ability to close out on those shooters. Ole Miss has got to knock down something from the perimeter in this ball game. Let's take a look at the shooting breakdown here as Mississippi State shoots from the field about 46% from the field, about 32% from the 3-point line. The Rebels shoot about 45% from the field, about 35.5% from 3-point line. I'm going to give a slight edge to Ole Miss as they're a better shooting team, especially from the 3-point line. As far as clutch situations, Mississippi State 7-2 in close game situation. That's despite shooting just 68% from the free throw line. As far as Ole Miss, 6-3 in close games, 73% from the foul line. Going to give a slight edge here to Ole Miss as they're a little bit more reliable from the free throw line, and that's always important in close game situations. Just taking a look at where Vegas opens this line at on yesterday. Looks like Ole Miss opened at a 4.5-point favorite. Our numbers don't seem to disagree with that whatsoever, so I'm going to give this one out as a courtesy pick. If you're listening to the podcast, I think Ole Miss is able to eke out a very close win, but make sure you keep an eye on that point spread as we get closer to tip off. That line could shift on you. You want to be careful here as well. And folks, we are heading down to beautiful Gainesville, Florida, as the Florida Gators welcome in the South Carolina Gamecocks. And folks, if you ever need to get right in the SEC conference, it is playing the South Carolina Gamecocks. This team is gritty, but they are winless in SEC play. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. You are looking at the O-Dome in Gainesville, Florida. Let's take a look at the team profiles here. South Carolina comes into this contest 10-14, 0-11 in conference play, 81st in our power rankings. Against quality opponents, you can imagine this team has absolutely struggled, going 1-13 in those close games. Against those quality opponents there. Forced the Florida Gators 21-3, 8-3 in SEC play. This team is our third ranked, power ranked team in the nation. Currently on a 3-game winning streak against quality opponents. This team is 11-3. So fantastic job there. We got a key injury here, and this is why we kind of delayed the podcast, is Alex Condon for the University of Florida. He's out with an ankle injury, ruled out, I want to say as early as Friday morning, so we kind of knew that he was going to be out. Florida loses a key front court presence there, so gonna need Ruben and Thomas to absolutely step up their rebounding on the interior. Did get some positive news back on the scoring front. Looks like Elijah Martin, he was listed as questionable. He was upgraded to probable, which means he is definitely going to give it a go in this matchup. And I'm just making a slight adjustment here to an error that I caught. So perfect. Okay. Now let's take a look at some key players for this contest, and we're going to start there with South Carolina. It starts with Colin Murray Bowles, averages about 14 points per game. Him, along with Zachary Thomas, that duo averages about, let's call it 24, 25 points per game. I think that they're going to have to pace those numbers, and they're probably going to have to combine for about 40 points in this ball game if they're going to give Florida a serious go in this contest. As far as the Florida Gators, it starts there with that three-headed monster of Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, and Will Richard. You're talking about for Clayton averaging about 18 points per game in conference play. Martin averages about 15, and Will averages about 12. I think if they stay on pace with their average in conference play, Florida's going to be very difficult to beat in this ball game. And here's the more concerning issue for the Gators. I'm sorry, for South Carolina going up against the Gators. All three of those young men shoot at least 30, let's call it 36% from the 3-point line. So you're talking about between the three of them, they average making about 7 made threes per game. So that's 21 points right there in your hip pocket. If they're able to knock down 7 made threes in this ball game, gonna be hard to beat here. But let's continue with the breakdown here. You can imagine when you've lost all 11 conference plays, you can imagine 11 conference games, you can imagine how poor South Carolina numbers are. Well, make no mistake, they are just about what you would expect. The worst scoring team in the SEC, only 61 points per game in conference play. Do a good job on the defensive end as they allow 72 points per game. That's 7th best in the conference. As far as the Gators average about 81 points per game in conference play, 4th best. And defensively, they are absolutely just as phenomenal, only allowing 71.5 points per game in conference play, 5th best. Florida, big time advantage here. South Carolina struggles to score the ball, ranking dead last in the SEC. And I just mentioned how much better Florida is on the offensive side of the ball. As far as South Carolina's offense versus Florida defense, South Carolina does a tremendous job of taking care of the ball. Low turnover rate, just about 10 turnovers per game. And this team is actually a really good defensive rebounding team. They're going to need to also be a good offensive rebounding team in this contest because Florida's defensive strengths, elite perimeter defense, opponents only shooting 28% from the 3-point line, and Florida forces about 12 turnovers per game. Key in this matchup, South Carolina's weak shooting, 39% from the field in conference play versus Florida's elite defense, allowing their opponents just to shoot about 41.5% from the field. As far as when Florida's on the offensive end of the court, this team is a very efficient shooting team, shoots about 46%, let's call it 47% from the field, 3rd best in the Southeastern Conference. And inside of that 3-point line, this team is very strong, shooting about 56% from inside of that 3-point line. South Carolina's strengths on defense, again, they force about 10 turnovers per game. Defensive rebounding team, as far as their total rebounding percentage at 55%, one of the better teams in the Southeastern Conference. Key for this matchup is Florida's transition offense versus that South Carolina interior defense. Florida either on turnovers or defensive rebounding, fast break opportunities. You want to get down the court. You want to get this game into the 70s, possibly even low 80s. You know, once you probably hit that 75-point threshold, that's where South Carolina is probably going to run out of gas in this contest. So Florida, it's imperative to get out early in this contest. Let's take a look at the shooting edge here for both of these teams. From the field, South Carolina shoots about 43%, 32% from the three-point line. Florida, 47% from the field, about 34.5% from the three-point line. Going to give the edge here to Florida as they just are a little bit more efficient in all of these shooting areas. As far as clutch situations, South Carolina 2-7 in close game situations, shooting 69%. Florida 2-2 in close game situations, 71%. Going to give a slight edge to Florida because of their overall winning percentage, and South Carolina struggle in conference play. A little bit of an edge also at the free throw line. Folks, this is one of the biggest spreads here on the slate. Our guys in the desert open this game at a 16.5-point line there in favor of Florida. Folks, this has all the makings of being able to get out of control if South Carolina is not able to stand that crowd there at the O-Dome in the first 8 minutes of this ball game. By the time we get to the under 12 media timeout, if South Carolina is starting to see Florida go on a run, this could get really out of hand. And for our next matchup, we head to Norman, Oklahoma, and the Lloyd Noble Center. You are looking live as the LSU Tigers travel to Norman to face the Oklahoma Sooners. And it is Boomer Sooner in this matchup. As folks, you want to talk about two teams that are absolutely struggling right now as far as conference play. Take a look at this matchup here. LSU comes into this contest 12-12 on the season, 1-10 in conference play, 82nd in our power rankings. This team comes in on a 7-game losing streak. And against quality opponents, LSU is only 4-12. Head coach Matt is facing a little bit of pressure down there in Baton Rouge. As far as Oklahoma, this team comes into this ball game 16-8, 3-8 in conference play, 40th in our power rankings, on a 3-game losing streak. And against quality opponents, they are 5-8. No significant injuries for either team in this matchup. Who has got to step up in this contest? It starts with LSU and their best player in Cam Carter, 17 points per game in conference play, 6th best scorer in the SEC, shoots about 84% from the free throw line, knocks down about 2 threes per game. I think, folks, him along with Jordan Sears, this duo who typically averages about 30 points per game, between the two of them, I think that they're going to have to go for almost 40 in this ball game, because outside of those two, they don't really have a third scorer anywhere close to double digits. D. Collins averages about 8.5 points per game. I think you're probably going to need him to touch double figures in this ball game. As far as the Sooners, Jason Edwards, AJ Hoggart, they average about 27 points per game. I think that they're going to have to go for bigger numbers. I think that they're going to have to get closer to that 40-point number in this contest. Folks, we talked about it. These teams absolutely struggle against give me just a moment while I make a slight correction here. Just taking a look at a number for Oklahoma that looks to be a little bit off here. There we go. All right, so I'm looking at a team here in Oklahoma, the home team in this contest. As I mentioned, coming in on a big time losing streak. And if you're looking for a team to get right against, and you're not talking about South Carolina, I'm going to say that the team to get right against is probably LSU at this point. And you really hate it for a program that has had success in years past under coaches like Dale Brown, when they had guys like Chris Jackson later, um, Shaquille O'Neal. This this is a proud program in LSU, and really just to see them struggling like this as a college basketball fan is quite challenging. All right, let's get into the matchup here. As LSU comes in averaging in conference play 67 points per game, 13th best in the conference. They are allowing 77 points per game. That's 12th in the conference. As far as Oklahoma, averaging about 74 points per game, 8th best in the conference. They're allowing 78 points per game. I'm going to give a slight edge here to Oklahoma just because they have a little bit better offensive production, but both teams absolutely struggle on the defensive end. And that's why their records sit where they sit currently. As far as when LSU has the ball, this team is a solid free throw shooting team, 74%. So get to the basket, get fouled, get into the double bonus early, take advantage of that free throw shooting percentage. And inside of the 3-point line, this team shoots about 56%. Oklahoma's defensive strengths, they force turnovers, 13 forced turnovers per game. And this team does a great job of guarding the 3-point line. Opponents shooting less than 29% from behind the arc. Key matchup for LSU when they're on offense. Their ability to score in the paint versus Oklahoma's interior defense going to be a key in this matchup. For when Oklahoma has the ball, Oklahoma's strength is efficient 3-point shooting about 37% from the 3-point line. And they also an excellent free throw shooting team, also at 80%. Same formula for Oklahoma. Get to the paint. Stop settling for perimeter shots. Be more aggressive going to the hole. Get fouled. Get to the line. Take advantage of your strengths there. For LSU, their defense, they force about 11 turnovers per game, and they do a really good job of blocking shots, 5 blocks per game. So key for Oklahoma in this match, when they have the ball in this matchup, they're outside shooting. They're going to have to knock down threes at a very good clip here. As far as the shooting edge goes, LSU shoots about 45% from the field, 31% from the 3-point line. Oklahoma, 47% from the field, 36.5% from 3-point line. Oklahoma, much more efficient shooting team, especially from the 3-point line. Clutch situations, 4 games for LSU, 2-2 for Oklahoma, 8 of those games, 5-3. This game is close going down the stretch. Oklahoma, with a little bit better free throw shooting percentage and the ability to get some of those wins in this contest. Folks, that's why you saw Vegas open this line up with 2 teams that absolutely struggle. Oklahoma opened this up as a 8.5 point favorite in this contest. Folks, it's going to come down to who can take care of the ball and who can get to the free throw line. I think I'm going to look at something that I typically don't look at. I'm going to look at, in this contest, free throw attempts. I think whoever gets the more free throw attempts, since both teams do a great job of knocking down their free throws, I think whoever gets to the line more in this ball game could come out on top. And folks, that leads us into the game with The Kentucky Wildcats versus the Texas Longhorns. You are looking live at the Moody Center. They're in Austin, Texas, as Texas welcomes in the Kentucky Wildcats. And folks, this matchup means everything for the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky comes into this contest with a 17-7 record, 6-5 in conference play, our 20th power ranked team in the nation. They come into this game on a 2-game winning streak. And Mark Pope doing a very solid job. His first year there in Lexington against quality opponents in 15 contests. This team is 8-7. As far as the Texas Longhorns, they come into this contest 15-10, 4-8 in conference play. They are riding a 3-game losing streak. Rodney Terry may start to get a little bit of pressure there in Austin as this team against quality opponents, 13 contests, they are 3-10. Key injuries in this ball game, and folks, we got them in spades in this contest. Arthur Kumala for Texas, very doubtful. I think it's probably not going to be available in this game. A key forward averaging about 13 points per game, 7.5 boards per game. His absence will significantly impact Texas' ability to rebound this ball game. Also, a bevy of injuries for the Wildcats. Jackson Robinson out for this contest, a sharpshooter averaging about 15 points per game, as well as Lamont Butler, who is questionable in this ball game, a defensive specialist who could play a big role in guarding the guards there for Texas. Let's start with the scoring breakdown here. Folks, Kentucky comes into this ball game as the second best scoring offensive team in the Southeastern Conference, third nationally in conference games, only 85 points per game, but they are the worst defensive team in the SEC as far as points per game goes, allowing almost 84 points per game. As far as Texas goes, in conference play, only 73 points per game. Ninth best in the conference. Defensively is another place where they struggle, almost 76 points per game allowed, 10th best in the conference. Going to give an edge here to Kentucky, but with Jackson being out, how will that impact their numbers? We'll have to wait and see. Kentucky's strength when they have the ball, elite field goal shooting team, shooting almost 49% from the field, and a SEC best at 42% from behind the arc. Fast-paced team, as I mentioned, like to get up and down the court. Texas' strength on defense, they force about 11 turnovers per game. They can be very physical in the paint as they block 4 shots per game. Can Texas slow down this Kentucky offense even without Jackson Robinson in the lineup? As far as Texas, when they have the ball, we'll call it balanced scoring when we're looking at them overall, as they average about 79 points per game. But as I mentioned, that takes a dip once we get into conference play. This team is really good from the free throw line, shooting 75%. We talked about Kentucky defensive struggles. Key for this matchup is, can Kentucky tighten up defensively, or will Texas be able to capitalize on their weaknesses from some of the defensive numbers? All right, let's take a look at the turnovers here. Kentucky turns the ball over about 10 times per game. They force 9. Texas turns the ball over about 9 times, forces about 11. Going to give a slight edge here to Texas, but both teams do a really great job of taking care of the ball, and neither team is forcing a significant higher number of turnovers. Let's take a look at the shooting percentage. And folks, these numbers are actually going to surprise you a little bit. Kentucky from the field, about 49% from the field, as I mentioned, 38 from three. Texas, 47% from the field, 37% from the three-point line. Folks, I got a sneaky feeling about this contest. Kentucky in close game situations, 5-3. Texas, 4-3 in those contests. Folks, with the injuries, this is why this line has moved where Texas is a 1.5 point favorite at most shops. Always shop for the best number in these matchups. Our numbers in Vegas are kind of leaning in the same direction here in this matchup. So going to be interesting to see how everything breaks down there in Austin. Folks, we got one game left on the board. Let's crank up the music. Folks, you are looking live at the biggest matchup in SEC basketball history. As I mentioned, the Alabama Crimson Tide welcome in the Auburn Tigers. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say both of these teams have wrapped up a number one seed once we get to Selection Sunday. But this is about the in-state rivalry. This is about the SEC regular season conference title and potentially being the number one seed going into the SEC tournament here in just a few weeks. Let's start right there with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama comes in with a 21-3 record, 10-1 in conference play on a 7-game winning streak. The Auburn Tigers have nothing to hold their head down about with a 22-2 record, also 10-1 in conference play. Did win their most recent contest against quality opponents, folks. These teams have absolutely been the best in the conference and the best in the country. For Alabama, 14-3 against quality opponents. The Auburn Tigers, just as good against quality opponents. As I pull this up here, almost an identical record all the way around, 14-2 against quality opponents. Folks, as for strength of schedule, these two teams have faced the hardest schedules in all of America. Alabama with the number one strength of schedule, Auburn right there behind them at number 3. Let's talk about the playmakers, because in this matchup, it's going to come down to key players in this matchup. Potentially National Player of the Year in Johnny Braum for the Auburn Tigers, 18 points per game. Like to see the big fella hit the boards a little bit more, as he averaging about 4.5 rebounds per game. But we know he also affects the blocked shots per game. Also, Miles Kelly, want to talk about him a little bit for the Auburn Tigers, averaging about 13 points per game, knocking down about 2.5 3-point shots per game. For the Alabama Crimson Tide, also potential National Player of the Year contender in Mark Sears, 17 points per game, gets to the foul line, folks, 6.5 times per game. And folks, he likes getting there because he's knocking down 86% from the free throw line. Also, his two running mates as far as picking up the scoring edge in Aiden Holloway and Grant Nelson. Folks, Aiden Holloway making a strong case for potentially second team all SEC here, averaging 13 points per game, knocking down 2 3-point baskets, and doing it at a 50% clip. That is absolutely impressive. And Grant Nelson starting to pick up his scoring a little bit, averaging about 12.5 points per game. Needs to get better at the free throw line, though. Struggles from the free throw line, only about 65% there from the free throw line. So, folks, let's get into this matchup here. You're going to hear a lot of impressive numbers here for both of these teams. Points per game. Alabama is the 9th best scoring team in the nation at 85 points per game, dips just a little bit in conference play, averaging 81.5 points per game, third best in the Southeastern Conference. Defensively is where this team is absolutely picked up. This team was one of the worst teams as far as allowing opponents to score. Nate Oates have made a adjustment there with his defense there. This team has actually now gotten inside of the top 75 in points per game nationally at 67, let's call it 68 points per game allowed. Does increase a little bit in conference play, but folks, this has been an improvement, allowing 73 points per game in conference play, ninth best there. I'm sorry, I just gave you the numbers for Auburn. Let me give you the numbers for Alabama there. So Auburn, third best in the conference in scoring, ninth best in defense. Alabama, number one nationally, number one in the Southeastern Conference there. Got too many A's here. Alabama averages about 90 points per game. Now, defensively, as I said, they have picked it up a little bit, but still one of the worst scoring defenses as far as points per game allowing 82 points per game, 15th best in the conference. That is still an improvement from where they were at the beginning there. So that's why I kind of jumped the gun looking at their defensive metrics here as it's gotten better over conference play. Alabama's offense is elite, but Auburn has a superior defense. If Auburn is able to slow this game down, like what we saw with Ole Miss when they went to Coleman Coliseum, could give them a slight edge here. Let's take a look at the offensive defensive comparison here. For Auburn, their strengths on offense, this team is a very efficient shooting team here. Shoots about 49% from the field, fourth best in the conference. Excellent ball movement as this team averages 17 assists per game. Alabama's defensive strengths, they do force about 10 turnovers per game. And believe it or not, this is one of the better defensive rebounding teams in the nation, not just the conference here, as Alabama's defensive rebounding percentage overall is at about 73%. Now in conference, dips just a little bit at 69%. So got to do a better job of really hitting those boards just a little bit more. So even what they have now that we're starting to inch closer to March. Key matchup, Auburn's 3-point shooting percentage here. The Auburn Tigers shoot at overall they're shooting at about 36% in conference play. Alabama's perimeter defense, this team does an excellent job of guarding the 3-point line. Whereas I'm looking for Alabama's opponents' 3-point shooting in conference play, right about 20, let's call it 30%. And folks, that's what they're allowing from a national standpoint as well there. So this team is elite guarding the 3-point line. As far as when Alabama has the ball, it's all gas and no brakes, baby. This team, fast tempo on offense, as this team likes to go ahead and get the ball going. Fastest tempo in the Southeastern Conference at about 76 as far as the pace goes. High volume of 3-point shots. Folks, this team shoots about 30 3-point attempts per game. They knock down about 10. This is a matchup to where Auburn better guard that 3-point line and close out on those shooters, because we just talked about it with Aiden Holloway. If you give him a wide open 3, more times than not, he is going to knock it down. As far as Auburn, this is one of the best teams as far as blocking shots. And of course, when you got Big JB back there anchoring the lane, this team averages about 7 blocks per game, and they force 7.5 steals per game. Key matchup in this part of the ball game is Alabama's transition offense versus Auburn's rim protection. Alabama, if they're able to control that defensive glass, you better believe Alabama's going to get out and run before Broome can get back and anchor down in the paint. Look for some easy transition buckets in this ball game. I'm going to keep an eye on the fast break points in this contest. If Alabama gets that number let's say into the high teens, low 20s, Crimson Tide could be in store for a major win in this contest. Let's take a look at the shooting edge here. Both teams shoot outstanding. Both teams about, let's call it 48.5% from the field. Auburn a little bit better from the three-point line as far as percentage goes, but we talk about that. Alabama makes up for it in the made threes per game. Let's just take a look really quickly here at that number, as Alabama makes about 10 threes per game. Auburn not too far behind as they knock down about 9 made threes per game. Auburn's going to have to shoot the ball tremendously from the three-point line. As far as clutch game situations, folks, their records speak for themselves. Auburn 6-1 in close game situations. Alabama 9-1. Both teams are battle tested in close game situations. I think because of this game, in this particular matchup being there in Tuscaloosa, that's why you see Vegas give Alabama just a slight edge as far as the point spread goes. Folks, I think this is going to be a tremendous matchup. So let me give you a couple of keys as we get out of the door here. Auburn's elite defense could keep them within striking distance all game long there. For Alabama, transition. It starts with keeping Auburn off of the rebounding glass here. I want to see how Bruce Pearl attacks the offensive rebounding in this ball game. If he's sending Brom to the boards on the offensive end, if Alabama's able to secure that defensive board, whether it's a tip out or Grant Nelson is able to grab that defensive rebound, get the ball out to Sears. Sears is going to push the paint. If Brom is down on the offensive end and can't get back defensively, that could allow Alabama some wide open transition threes or an easier shot at the in the lane there without Brom as he's trying to get back down the court. I think Alabama is going to stick to who they are as a program with Nate Oates as the head coach. This team is looking to play at a very frenetic pace in the first quarter. Kind of what we learned from the legendary Arkansas Razorback head coach and Nolan Richardson when he talked about the 40 minutes of hell. I think Alabama's offense is going to be that version of the 40 minutes of hell for Auburn in this ball game. I think if Alabama is able to get this game before we get to intermission into the 40s, that's actually playing at the pace that Alabama wants this game. That doesn't mean that Auburn can't score, but what Alabama wants to do is force you into a pace that they are much more comfortable with. Want to see if Bruce Pearl tries to pull his Tigers back just a little bit to make sure Alabama isn't getting out into transition. Don't be afraid to burn one of those timeouts early in the first half, as that crowd at Coleman Coliseum gives this Alabama team a lot of juice. We're going to see this matchup here in just a few weeks there on the plains of Auburn. So this is the first of 2 matchups in conference play. Would not be surprised if we get these teams battling it out again once we get to the SEC tournament. And folks, it's not crazy to think that these 2 teams could square off in the Final Four, something that I don't think we have seen, at least in recent memory, team playing 4 times in college basketball in one season. I think this is going to be a fantastic matchup. Looking forward to the breakdown. Folks, enjoy your college basketball Saturday as I turn it back over to Tina to take us out. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEC conference call. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things SEC basketball. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more basketball content. And make sure to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on the SEC conference call.